originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Mr. Matt Maloney. We are back in studio for a third time with Miss Shaunti Feldhahn. Welcome, Shaunti.
Thanks.
If you haven't listened to the first two episodes, I highly encourage you to start at the first episode and listen all the way through. The content is so rich and so good. And I know for me, it was super empowering and super inspirational. For today's episode, we're going to change the channel a little bit. We're going to step outside of talking about thriving in love and money in her book, and we're going to talk about something that Shaunti calls the 30-day kindness challenge.
Yeah.
What is it? Why is it? How do we participate in that? What is that exactly?
So the 30-day kindness challenge is a name that we gave to a process that really matters to improve any relationship. Because we discovered when we went back through all of our research, our research is basically, when we talk about digging out like the little things that make a big difference, it's all sort of how do you thrive in your life and relationships, right? And there was a thread when we went back through all the studies that whether you thrive in your life and relationships is more correlated to how you treat others.
Oh, sure.
Than how you yourself are treated, which is very counterintuitive because we think things will work better if we're treated better. And it turns out, obviously that's important, but if you really want to thrive, focus on being kind, how you treat other people. The problem that we discovered is that we all think we are kind. And we're deluded. we're not as kind as we think we are.
Right.
And this 30-day kindness challenge was a process that we tested empirically, like what is it that you do for someone in order to truly improve that relationship. And so we identified that it's these same three things that you do every day for 30 days, which I can explain really briefly if you want me to.
Sure, I'd love for you to. Yeah, the audience would really love this.
Yeah, and by the way, it sounds so simple, and yet statistically we were blown away by how impactful this simple little process was. So you have to pick somebody to do this for.
Okay.
Anybody listening is going to be tempted to do this for multiple people.
Okay.
Pick
one
one
person. Okay.
Yeah, pick one.
That's the key, person.
The next time, go ahead and do it for whoever you want to. But the first time, it's kind of a boot camp. Kind of opens your eyes a bit. So you do these three things for 30 days. So first, you say nothing negative about that person, either to them or about them to somebody else. And that's often where we sabotage ourselves.
Yeah.
Because, like, for example, I did this for my 16-year-old daughter at the time. And she's a great kid, but, 16.
16.
I really wanted...
I have a 15-year-old, so I understand.
You get it, exactly. And so I could be polite to her, but if I go behind the scenes to Jeff and I'm like, you would not believe what she did, or she's getting so sassy. What I don't realize is that I am actually sabotaging how I feel about her.
Sure.
And I'm actually training myself to be an unkind person. I don't think of it that way, but that's what I'm doing. So that first thing, don't say anything negative to or about them. Second thing is find one thing you can sincerely praise, sincerely affirm, and you tell them and you tell somebody else. So I can't complain to Jeff about whatever she said, but I'm kind of looking for things to praise. And so I notice, say, for example, that her brother was trying to provoke her and she wouldn't let him, and she was kind anyway. And I say, thank you for doing that. I'm really proud of you. And then I tell Jeff, you know what she did?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's basically focusing, it's the neuroscience principle of what you focus on is what you'll see.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that you do every day for 30 days is a small action of kindness or generosity. So for her, an action of generosity would be something simple like she comes running into my home office while I'm working on a deadline and she's like, hey, Mom, watch this little TikTok, And normally I would say, let me finish this deadline and then I'll do it. But an action of generosity is turning my attention to her right then. Yeah. When she's excited about it rather than an hour later. What we found is that if you will do these 3 things every day for 30 days, 89% of relationships improved, which is a huge number.
89% of your relationship with that person?
With that, yes. Okay, 89% of the relationships in which you did this, 89% of those improved. And that is a really, really startling number, especially in social science. Like you don't see those kinds of numbers.
It's off the charts.
But we sort of realized eventually, it actually makes sense because the main thing that you're doing, you think of it as improving the temperature of the relationship and impacting the other person. And it is, of course. But the biggest thing that it's doing is it's changing you.
No doubt.
And so that makes perfect sense then.
Yeah.
That high of a relationship percentage. And that has all sorts of implications in your leadership world.
No doubt. I mean, because the one thing that you can control is you. You can't control the other person, right? My wife and I talk about that, and we talk about that in some of our leadership development. But my wife and I talk a little bit about just those pathways in the brain, right?
Yeah.
And we try to picture them with our kids as, rivers flowing through sand, and they create that. And it's either going to create a negative pathway or it's going to create a positive pathway.
Yep.
And that's a good visual reference for them to see. And we've talked about that because of how they may speak to one another, or how they talk about their sibling about something.
Exactly.
And
well, one of the things that we found essentially is that all of us have far more of a rut into the negative pathways than we realized.
Sure.
And so we need we need something like this. Like it doesn't have to be this one, but we need some sort of a boot camp, some sort of a shock to the system to jump out of that negative rut, jump into the positive one, and trying to make it deeper and wider and more of our default.
Johns Hopkins University did research on over 30 years on just the influence and the power on the body of positive mindset and positive thinking. And one of the, I don't remember all of the statistics, but one of them that did stand out is that heart disease reduced by 13% in those people at that population over that 30-year period who were positive versus those that had a tendency. Because we all have a tendency in certain things, like you said, that rut is deeper on the negative. And I thought that was astonishing to me.
Well, there's been all sorts of science on that. That Johns Hopkins study is one of many that studied like different avenues of this.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a ton of things that even look at like the percentage of the toxins in the blood and how they go down when you're kind. And it leads to all sorts of things like reduced heart attacks, not just because you're less stressed, which is maybe the easy thing to think, but it's literally the body builds health when you're kind. It's unbelievable.
It's a biological response in your body, right?
It is.
It's incredible.
And it's one of the things that for me as a person of faith, I go, okay, there's a lot of reasons why God says to be kind, why there's such a premium put on that. It's not just for the sake of other people, it's for our sake as well.
Well, that's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that with me and the audience. Let's change the channel in the conversation. I'd like to get to know you a little bit more up close and personal. We've got just a few minutes here left. So do you have a life motto, scripture, creed, motto, something that you live by that resonates with you?
My favorite scripture is Philippians 4:8. And it talks about, think on whatever is lovely. Think on whatever is excellent and worthy of praise.
I love that.
And it's very easy to think on what drives us crazy. And so in terms of how it impacts us, how we relate to others, it is so powerful when we will choose to focus on the best rather than the worst.
Yeah. Goes back to that mindset, right? In the heart. So, okay, let's have a fun question. If you could hop into a DeLorean, back to the future, go back in time and meet your younger self, what kind of advice would you give your younger self?
I'm sure I'm going to be very unoriginal by saying this, but I used to take everything so darn seriously. Mm-hmm. And so I used to get so tense and worked up by everything. And, with the addition of a few extra years under your belt, you kind of go, what? There's so many people, for example, relationships that I damaged by taking something that they said like so darn seriously, as opposed to just letting it roll off my back, you know? And so learning that skill earlier, I think I would have avoided some of the damage that was caused.
That's great advice. Yeah, that's great
well,
advice.
especially for a strong kind of opinionated personality like me. So, yes.
All right, last question. For someone who is an author, and you, when the books are written about you, though, one day, what do you hope that the books or that they say about the type of person, the type of leader, the type of mother, or perhaps wife that you are? I'll
be candid. I relate so much to that song, Only Jesus. I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't want them to remember me. I don't want them to write books around me.
Yeah.
Just Jesus.
That's great. That's good. Thank you. Shaunti, thank you for joining. This has been phenomenal. I want to close out with a quote or a scripture here from Proverbs 31:25. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future. It's back to not being so serious, right? Don't worry so much.
Yep.
All right. To all of our listeners and subscribers out in podcast land, I hope today's episode was both empowering and inspirational. Until the next episode, I hope and pray that our daily lives are filled with opportunity to lift others up as we aim to go above and beyond. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Our executive producer and host is Matt Maloney, President and CEO of FAM360. Strategic Communication Coordinator, Michelle Ducato. Production assistance by Tin Dog Studios. Director, John Berland. Creative Assistant, Whitney Berland. Theme song, Connecting Dots by Curtis Cole, provided by Artlist. Please subscribe today and don't miss any of our weekly episodes.